Yeah, I think all a bit nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry guys, I've never done this before, so
Okay, I'm just
probably tell.
Gotta start somewhere.
So yeah, you guys all okay with the questions and everything?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so there's a new link.
Seven on. Oh, it says we're live. Oh. Okay, good to know.
Oh, great.
Yay.
Okay, so hello everybody, thank you for joining us. Today I'm joined by three of the writers of Folklore, a Dark Anthology, which releases along with Murder the March Hare this Friday. We're doing live streams interviewing our authors every day until the launch. Before we start, if you're new to our channel, we're an indie press dedicated to bringing the world the very best in new adults, young adults, and children's fiction. We post our book trailers and wisdom from our authors here on our YouTube channel every Friday. So if you're new here, you like what you see and you want to learn how to improve as an author, consider subscribing. Be sure to stay tuned until the end of this video, where we'll be announcing 3 announcements that we'll be announcing later this week. So stay tuned for that. So to start, why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Who wants to go first?
I can introduce myself. So hello everyone, my name is Virginie. I've been writing since forever, basically, and my day job is in luxury retail. I do kind of learning and development stuff, so a lot of storytelling in my day job as well.
I'll go next. I'm Natalie. I wrote the Kernzum sales story. You can find me on Twitter at NatJeanM. And I don't have a day job right now. So right now I am trying to make a career out of my writing.
Like a real writer.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm Alice. I've been kind of on-off writing for a few years, but I've only just started really trying to get serious with it. My day job at the moment is I work at a school just setting up science lessons and buying in all the chemicals and bits, and yeah.
Good.
The 2 contributors to the collection that weren't able to join us for any of our live streams this week. These questions are for all of you, which is good because I chose really weirdly specific questions for each of you that may just have like monosyllabic answers. So it's good that I have some other questions.
The questions were great. I was like, these are great questions.
Yeah. Pretty in depth.
So the first few are from Ashley Craig, the author of a fantastic retelling of Rumpelstiltskin written from his perspective. If you're watching this later and you want to hear her talk about her story, I'll put her contributions to our Ask Our Author series in the cards in the top right-hand corner. I haven't done that yet, but I will later. And if you want a free copy of Folklore, a Dark Anthology on Thursday, a full day before the official release, you can head over to her Twitter at acraig2019 to enter her giveaway. So, first question is, when it comes to your writing process, are you a pantser or a plotter?
I think I'm a mixture of both. I'm definitely not like a very, very intricate plotter, but I like to have an idea of where the story should be going.
Yeah, I'm more of a planner for sure, a plotter. I do need to have the beats and everything worked out so that I know where I'm going when I'm ready to write. So yeah, definitely a bit more organized. I try to be, at least when I'm writing.
Yeah,
I'd say probably the same with Virginie, because I used to just make it up as I went along. But recently I tried planning it out a bit more and I'm finding it a lot easier. So somewhere in between.
it helps when you're retelling like folklore, right? Because like the plot.
Yeah, you've got some set rules there.
Yeah, mixture of both. Can you hear us still?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
good. Did you hear my question?
I think we missed your question.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
That would explain it. Which usually comes first for you, the plot or the characters?
For me, it's definitely the characters. I think I have to be able to hear their voice in my head. And that's usually how it starts. Like it'll start with something they would say or a phrase or a scene. And from there it can build, but I've never been able to work back from plot.
Yeah, characters are always my forefront, like how they look, how they act. That comes first, and then I try to make a plot around them. Is usually how it ends up.
I guess I'm the odd one out then, because I usually get just an idea of what I want to write first, and then the characters just develop from there.
Writing day for you.
Sorry, I think we keep missing the beginning
Just
of
the beginning of that, yeah.
Okay. I think I'll just move my mic closer. What's a typical writing day for you?
I guess because I'm working quite, like my day job takes up quite a lot of my energy. So it tends to be not really full days. It's like on the weekend at midnight is usually when the creative juices start flowing. I'm like, aha, yes, now I have time to write and no one will disturb me.
Because I'm home all day, I do try to do all my writing in the morning. I find like usually after I get up and from like the early morning, like mid-morning around 9 to 10, I will write until like lunchtime or 2 o'clock or something, and then take a break. And usually that's everything's like is all out, and then I have to do something else because my brain's too frazzled or too emptied at that point.
For me, it's kind of in the evening after work, and I try and get like a minimum amount of words in, and then if I'm really doing well, I'll keep going until I get tired. But a lot of the time I just reach the word target and then stop.
You have to make the most of those days when you're like, yes, I can.
Yeah, if you can keep going, do.
Yes.
Stop.
Hey, the next question is, how many works in progress do you have ongoing right now?
Just the one, thank God.
Good. That's a good sign.
I
You're focused on one thing.
When I was a teenager, I used to never be able to finish a project because I would get ideas for another one, and it would be like the new shiny thing that I'd want to write immediately. And I've been working on the same project now for 2 years, so I'm very, very proud of myself in terms of commitment. And a month ago, I had a shiny, bright new idea, and I was like, no, stop. Don't distract me. It's an idea for later. It's not been abandoned.
No, exactly. I just finished a novel, so I'm on the break right now, but I've got like 2 second drafts that I've just finished this past few months, and I just finished this other first draft. So, and then there's, I don't know, like that's about 3 or 4 is probably where I'm at right now, just in different stages. Like I have stories, like you said, like they came to me, I have to jot them down just to get them on paper, but eventually I'm gonna go back to them when I have more time. But I've got probably around 3 or 4 that are in the progress of different stages of or finishing, like first and a couple of second drafts finished, and I'll go back in a circle and go back and through them again.
Yeah, I'm trying not to let myself get distracted by too many bright, shiny new ideas at the moment. So I've got one which I've finished the draft of and gone through 1 round of editing, and I'm going to go back to that one later, and one which I'm still writing the first draft of. So it's just really those 2 at the moment.
I think I'm really impressed that you guys have managed complete first drafts. I've not managed like a complete first draft of anything longer than a short story so far.
It took forever.
Okay, the next question is, what's the key theme in your story? This is a good one.
I guess the key theme is there's something there about family and who your family really are, and finding a way to kind of be true to yourself. I'm going to go with that. I think I'm writing
That's a pretty good answer.
a novel length version, which I think expands on it more. I'm trying to think of the short story version, whether that's true, but I think that still holds true.
I was always like, mine was more focused on like independence and like forging your own path. And there is the whole choosing your family or like finding your own family to stick to is kind of where I was leaning towards. So.
Now that you two have said it, I can kind of see the finding your own family in my story, but I think mainly what it was kind of escaping and moving on from all the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it was.
Yeah. And of course, we've discovered there's a nautical theme in all
Yeah.
the
Yeah, in all of us.
Yeah, that was the reason why I did get you guys
I
on the
thought so.
same live stream. Also, it's because I've just read a book from like the 1920s, which was like a collection of sea-related myths from around the world. So I guess that was kind of what I was thinking about at the time. Actually, there's a question that I was going to ask Alice later, but I might as well ask all of you. You know, do you think in there's sort of recurring themes generally in sort of water people related myths?
I won't steal your answer, Virginie.
we were in a kind of group
We were
chat.
discussing this in the chat.
Sharing what our
Brilliant.
But actually with this story, because it's based on a myth that's not really, the original myth isn't really centered on the island of Longka. It's more about Prince Rama and his heroic journey. So it's not really, it doesn't actually really at its core have a nautical theme. So it just so happens that because I chose a minor character and this is where she would be based, that's how it turned out. But I love the ocean. I love the sea. Your book sounds fantastic. I definitely want the title of that book. And in the past, I've written a lot of stories about the sea and kind of the myths around it. So yeah, it's very open. It's like the beginning of a journey, and it's also very dangerous, but also very beautiful. So.
Well, it kind of goes back into like how like the symbology around water too. I think it's a lot of it can mean a lot of different things, and I think it's a lot to like that's probably why it can be used a lot in different stories to mean different things. So
Cool. Yeah, I think there tends to be a thing about like forbidden love and forbidden desire and like permanence. Obviously, Little Mermaid is a great example of that, and a few of the other stories I've been reading that they do have this theme of being, you know, trapped at sea or trapped on land.
Yeah.
I liked your story actually with when the pirates show up at the end. I was like, oh
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that at all.
Yeah, I just, you know, let's add some pirates.
Yeah, I remember watching the Ask Our Authors video where you were discussing you know, changing the ending and everything, and I was like, ooh, I wonder what happens here.
Yes, very much a like, I don't like the ending, so what would I like? I'm like, let's put some more action in there, and okay, pirates will make sense in the time frame and setting, and it's like, okay, perfect, this works.
Especially because the original fairy tale is so like, I mean, a lot of original fairy tales are dark, but that one's just so depressing. It's like,
it is, yeah, it is,
Yeah.
and that's why I kind of want to make it a bit more upbeat because of that too.
like either option you choose, you're just forever like suffering and pain forever. Which suffering?
Yeah, exactly.
Great choices.
Oh, what book are you currently reading?
I guess I'll go this. I am actually rereading the Harry Potter series right now. I am on book 7, but I have a few other books that are in the lineup right now. I have a stack by my desk, so.
I don't think I've revisited them since. I wonder, you know, when you're a bit scared to revisit something because you're like, I loved it.
Yeah.
I have a few series that like are like that, but somehow I can get through Harry Potter and it doesn't have that effect on me. But I was also in high school when I first started reading them, so I might have a different aspect in if you read them as a kid, sort of thing. So
Yeah, fair. I've just finished reading a book called Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and it's a kind of Gothic horror set in the 1950s in Mexico, and the main character is this Mexican like socialite, and her cousin sends a mysterious letter that, you know, claims she's being poisoned by her in-laws, and so she goes to the house to investigate, and it's really, really creepy and very, very good. I definitely recommend.
yeah, that
Oh
definitely
yeah,
makes
I
sense.
saw you talking about it on Twitter. It looks really good.
Super good.
So yeah, I'm just reading a silly fantasy called Dragon Removal Service, and I haven't got that far into it, but it's quite funny, and I am enjoying it.
Ooh.
Is it kind of along the lines of like a not that I've ever really read Terry Pratchett, but like that sort of?
I don't think it's like, it's not quite that silly, sort of, but yeah, it's almost.
It still sounds fun.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, just fun and light-hearted, really.
Yeah, that's why I chose Harry Potter. I needed something lighthearted
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense with these times, to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. You guys hear that?
No, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
What do you guys like to do when you aren't writing?
I'm a big crafter. So like, as you see the quilt behind me, I do a lot of quilting. I just started some crocheting, and then I play a lot of video games. So you get some inspiration from those. But those are, I'm crafting, and then video games is my other probably hobby at the time.
I play a lot of video games as well. And also I quite like going bouldering. I haven't been able to do that recently because of lockdown and everything, but hopefully soon I'll be able to get back to it.
I like going for walks, and you can probably tell from the fact I keep jumping into everything. I'm quite an extrovert, so I do like finding time to spend time with friends and close ones, and cycling. I like cycling as well. I've also discovered baking. I never thought I'd be into that, but lockdown has been surprising in the new
It's the
activity.
time for new hobbies.
Yeah. Have you attempted sourdough? I heard everyone's trying to make sourdough and it's not working.
No, I'm definitely not that, like I know myself, and I was like, that seems definitely too advanced and too much work. Like I just want cake.
Okay. Thinking back to when you were a kid, what's the first thing you remember wanting to be when you grew up?
Is it going to sound really lame if I say I do actually think it was probably being a writer?
No, that's great. That's probably why you've managed to stay focused on one thing so soon. You already knew you were going to be a writer.
Yeah, I don't know what the first thing was, because I wanted to be a lot of things when I was a kid, but a writer was definitely on the list. Yeah, along with like a teacher, a scientist, I can't remember what else. A lot of things.
Cool.
Yeah, same thing. I think teacher was near the start when I was a kid, but I think writer I was starting to get into or trying to think about becoming a writer when I was like around grade like 4 or 5 or something. Like, so when I was like maybe around like 10 or something, I was thinking about it. But yeah, it was always in the background, but it was that whole like, can I do it or not? So, but yeah, teacher was always up on the list. And I think I was very artistic as a kid too. So something to do with art was always on the top as well. So
Yeah, I'd say same for me. It was like writing and illustrating, and then you read Roald Dahl and you're like, oh, that's a thing that exists. Okay, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, those are all of the questions that Ashley sent me. So, Ashley, if you're watching this, thank you very much. Those were very good questions. These questions are from Joseph Chaplain, the author of Fairies from Folklore Dark Anthology. If you want to hear about how he turned an old poem from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory into a short story, I'll put his contributions to our Ask Our Author series in the cards and top right after the stream. So his first question is, what are some tips about how you go about publishing your work?
This is probably my first work to be published, not self-published, basically. So look for indie publishers who are running competitions.
Yeah, this is the first thing I've had published or self-published or anything. So same, I guess.
Great.
Yeah, it's my first published, and then I have self-published a few short stories on Kindle, but as for tips, like that's, yeah, like, you know, you just gotta probably just keep your nose to the grindstone, kind of keep looking for like these sort of like, you know, contest and like short story contest opportunities. And I think that's all I can really think about right now.
Cool. The next question is, how many times do you redraft/rewrite something before it's ready?
Probably
I think
too
it
many.
depends on the
Yeah.
item. I've, like with the novel length version of this short story, there are whole chunks of it that I've rewritten and changed, which I'm normally, in the past, I've always been very, very scared of doing. So I was like, oh my God, you're deleting several hundred words and rewriting everything. But yeah, I do think when you get properly into editing, you do end up having to rewrite some of it, actually. That depends.
Yeah, I've been working on a story for 10 years now, a novel, and I think I've had like written it like 7 times already. Like I've had like at least 7 drafts, various different types of drafts. Like some of them I like almost written the book and then realized it didn't work, so go back to an older draft and go from there again. And it's like, so I've definitely been through, you just keep going until you feel like it's ready. I feel like it's always much as, you know, as many drafts as it takes until you feel satisfied is
Do you
basically
have
what
them all saved separately, or is there like just one master file that?
I use Scrivener. And so I have in Scrivener, I can make different folders. And so I have like a draft per folder. So I just stack them on top of each other. And so I can always like, so yeah, if I delete something and then realize I need to bring it back in, I can just go back to an older version that had it, edit it back in sneakily like that.
Okay, the next question from Joseph is, who are some of your favorite authors?
It's always like asking to choose your favorite song or something, isn't it? It's like choose just one or a few. I really love, there's an author, her name is Shannon S.A. Chakraborty. She's written The City of Brass, and it's a fantasy trilogy set in the medieval Islamic world, and it's very, very good. Like,
I've heard of it.
Political intrigue, court intrigue, a lot of, again, I don't know, really, really nuanced and morally gray characters as well. And not morally gray because they're trying to be cool, just very human. Like you can see the conflict from every side, and you really feel like, wow, this isn't going to be easily resolved. Then Diana Wynne-Jones is a favorite of mine from childhood as well.
Yeah, it's same thing. It's hard to pick just one. Like I tend to always try to find new authors too, like whenever I'm in the bookstore. So it's like I don't really have one that I gravitate to the most. But the ones that have influenced me a lot were like growing up in Canada, L.M. Montgomery, who wrote the Anne of Green Gables series, was always been like one of my heroes when I was reading those books as a kid and a young adult. Other ones were Anne McCarthy, Ernest Cline, who wrote the Ready Player One, which I really loved. And Orson Scott Card was another author that got me into sci-fi. So it's just like, it's more the people who inspired me to write in the genres that I like.
Yeah, I quite like Jeff Vandermeer just because his stories are really weird and bizarre, and you don't know what's gonna happen at all with them. And I just quite like the weird stories, and I quite like writing weird stories as well. So like you said, just the genre type. Yeah, inspiration, I guess.
Cool. Sorry, I feel like I just keep saying cool. I should find another word to say. Fantastic. That also applies. What are your favorite books and why?
I feel like this is kind of like the favorite author's question. It's like, oh god.
Yeah.
Like even more
Like,
specific.
where do we start?
Yes.
But yeah, so The City of Brass I definitely would recommend. I also really like The Poppy Wars by R.F. Kuang. It's again another fantasy set in kind of ancient China, but actually the plot and the characters are very, very inspired by 20th century Chinese history. So the kind of the Civil War, the rise of communism, and like Mao in particular, and the invasion from Japan. So if I'm like, history and fantasy are my two loves. So when they meet in the same book, I tend to really, really love that.
Yeah, again, like it's really hard. Like I said, like, like Orson Scott Card's The Ender Games series really got me into sci-fi in a way that I never thought I would like, sort of thing. So it opened up that door of sci-fi worlds and books and everything else to me that, from there, I think I read some like of the Dune prequels and some other, like I would open myself up to some of the older sci-fi sort of thing. So it definitely inspired me. Other favorite books, again, like Ready Player One, with all the pop culture references in this new, like, almost dystopian future, I think was just hilarious how, like, again, with all the 80s culture into this one book, and it just, for me at least, it was really much a nostalgic trip.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I really liked The Martian, if we're talking about sci-fi, actually. Yeah, I thought that was funny and really enjoyable to read. And there's Born by Jeff Vandermeer, which I quite like, because again, it's just a really unique post-apocalyptic world, and it's just really interesting to read.
Okay. Kevin has just sent me some questions, so I'll read these ones out as well. Has having your work published changed your writing process?
Not really, not for me so far. It's still a lot of, edit before sending it out. But yeah, nothing so much has changed.
I think the only thing it's changed is that I'm very, very excited now. So I try to be more conscious about writing more.
Yeah, maybe a confidence boost, but I don't think it's changed the process as such.
Well, I'm very glad it's given you guys a confidence boost because you're all great writers.
Thank you.
As a writer, what would you choose as your mascot / avatar / spirit animal?
Something nocturnal and lazy, to be honest. I love.
Sorry, go ahead.
I love sloths. They're like my favorite animal, and I
love sloths.
I think they are nocturnal actually, and that would make sense because I do try, like on the weekend. I'm like, it's daytime, I should write, but it just, the time when I want to write tends to be like midnight when everything else is quiet, like the house is quiet, the street is more or less quiet, and I'm in my zone. And because I'm doing a lot of research on Thai occult and necromancy, I freak myself out. But sloth is the answer, basically.
Yeah, slow and steady.
Yeah, that too. It is very slow and steady.
Yeah, I've always had an affinity towards wolves. As a kid growing up, I'd always wanted them to be my spirit animal, sort of thing. So again, maybe like I've always been a loner too. So again, writing's pretty lonely task. So I always kind of associate myself with the wolf sometimes. So.
Alice, do you know what your spirit animal or something would be?
maybe tortoise, because that's all I can think of.
I love tortoises. They're very cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're cute.
Yeah. Okay. There's questions. Oh, this is an interesting one. Has the lockdown or current situation in the world changed the way you write?
Not so much the way, but I was able to spend a lot more time writing, so I got a lot more done.
I'd agree with Alice. It's the same. I think I still write in the same way, but between the book getting published and not having a real social life anymore, I was like, "Great, I know what I'm focused on for every night now."
Yeah, as much as at the beginning it was hard to focus and write, I think like as the weeks went on, it definitely helped me focus a bit more. And also, like, I can't kind of like goof off because like my husband's working from home now, so he's taken over the basement. So I kind of like, he's like, well, you should be working while I'm working. So it's definitely helped me more like, okay, streamline, get some stuff done or get some editing done, and kind of helped me get into more of a routine that I've been lacking since I started working from home. So
Great accountability partner there.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So let's see if is there any other questions. Oh, this is also, I suppose it's related to the question earlier. How many hours a day do you write?
It can really vary for me.
We're all sitting here like, I don't know.
Sometimes I'll just sit down and do half an hour and then be like, no, I can't do it anymore. Other times I can just go on for like 2-3 hours and be fine. So
There
yeah,
was
mood and where I'm at with the story, I guess.
No, like, yeah, like now that I have like, no, after like having breakfast or something, I sit down and I write. So I'm good at most of the days. I can do like a good 3 hours, 4 hours in a row. But there are days too where I can't focus. So like I would write for half an hour, then I would go on Twitter or go on social media and then come back for another half an hour and kind of like back and forth. I don't get as much done, but it depends on how focused I am.
Yeah, I think there was a tweet on Twitter that I found really funny because it was talking about historical fiction writers, and it's like, do you ever sit down going, yes, I will write 2,000 words today? And then you're like, wait, what kind of spoon would this character use? Go down a research rabbit hole. And that happens to me a lot because, you know, it's really hard because you're trying to write something. You're like, oh, okay. And I found some of the kind of research rabbit holes I had to go down was like, maybe for the novel than for the short story, but like Thai magic is a thing that exists, like people believe in it. I'm not a practitioner myself or a believer myself, but it's like a real thing that exists. So I was like, well, I can't just make it up. I need to actually know what I'm talking about and understand what people believe about it and how they use it. And so it felt very hard to write any scenes about necromancy or magic without knowing that. So that was a big research rabbit hole, basically.
Yeah, I imagine that's be really difficult to like sort of write about a mythology as a fictional thing when it is something that is a religion to people.
Yeah, so I'm conscious of that, and I want to do it well and respectfully, and not, you know, I'm also conscious that the Ramayana, which is the story that I've adapted, it's originally an Indian myth. The Thai people have our version of it, but it is for a lot of Hindus like a, you know, not as a religious text, but it's a text that's kind of like it has religious morals associated with it. So not something that it's not like a normal fiction, basically.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's all the questions from Joe, Kevin, and Ashley. Thanks to all of them. And so we can get into the weird specific questions I wrote. I'll start. Who wants to start? I should probably ask who wants to start.
I think you're going to have to pick someone.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Virginie.
Yes.
Am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, you are actually. Yes.
I just wanted to make sure. As you mentioned in one of our Ask Our Author videos, you are half Thai and half French, and you were raised with the knowledge of both folklores as well as other well-known European tales and mythology. What sort of differences and similarities have you noticed between like the mythologies?
I mean, I guess the similarities is that there's, with a lot of particularly like epic myths, we always have a hero. He always, vanquishes evil, however evil is presented in some way. And the hero always represents the kind of virtues of that society, whatever that might be. And you, like, if we take the Ramayana and the Thai version, it's called the Ramakien. Rama is meant to represent all these virtues of what like a, what a hero should be in this culture. I would say the differences, I'm not sure. I think the differences are maybe more, it's hard to say, because I think like if you look at folklore from both cultures, they'll have a lot of stuff to do with, the nature of life and death, ghosts comes up a lot in Western folklore, but like a lot in Thai folklore. And I think it might be more about I guess because in Thailand, it's predominantly a Buddhist society. So it's a lot about karma and that's kind of the moral grounding of the stories. Whereas in the West, the moral grounding is a bit different, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Was Thai mythology and European mythology introduced to you differently?
Yes, kind of, because I went to an international school in Thailand. So I was born there, I was raised there, but all my schooling was in English. And I actually, the reason I write in English is my first language. So I can read and write English. I learned a lot of folklore and mythology from my school. Kind of year 6, here are the Greek gods. And then I loved it a lot. So I went on to read a lot more. And it was much easier actually for me to access Western mythology because I could just read English and that was fine. And with Thai folklore, it was more stories from like my grandmother or my mom would tell me. So it was a little bit more this like oral storytelling tradition or stuff that you grew up with, where it's like, oh, okay, like this sort of ghosts exist and this is what he does, or this is what he looks like, or this is where they live. And so the difficulty for me in the research as well is that because I can read very basic Thai, I couldn't read a full-on book in Thai. My Thai isn't good enough for that. I have to find English language sources, and they're not that many basically, just to see like, what I remember someone telling me when I was 5. Is that really how the myth goes? Like, what other variations of it exist? I feel like I have to do more, even though I grew up with it. So some of it was like, I feel like I absorbed. I have to research a lot more the Thai folklore.
So is the Thai folklore, does it feel like more, like are you more emotionally connected with it because it's, you were introduced to it by your family rather than from school?
Yes and no. I think it's a bit more precious to me because I can see from the way that I was raised how easily I could have lost it, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like, it's not that it's more emotionally resonant with me, because I think emotional resonancy is just how well characters are described and how believable they are and the conflicts that they face, which is true in any kind of storytelling. But with those ones, it's more precious because I'm like, oh, if you hadn't taken as an interest that I have taken, you wouldn't have even, remembered this story or thought to ask your mom about it. Because I remember you have Thai TV soap operas. They're kind of like telenovelas. They're a little bit over the top. And I remember one about a crocodile king kidnapping this woman, and it used to terrify me and scare me. And this is just a memory from when you're a kid and you're like, did I dream that? Was that So I asked my mom, I was like, was there a TV show like 20 odd years ago with like a crocodile king kidnapping women? She's like, oh yeah, it's this folktale. And then, you know, I ask her to tell it to me, and it's kind of like I have to be the detective to find these nuggets of gold, otherwise it would just go.
So it's not sort of, well, it's not that well known in the pop culture that you're surrounded by now. So
Yeah,
but,
I think
like,
particularly
Greek
because
mythology and stuff like that.
I guess because again, it's more of a language barrier thing. It
Yeah.
probably is more accessible if I was able to read all Thai media. You know, I can read Thai, but it's very, very hard.
Yeah.
And my Thai isn't that great. So it's not as accessible to me. And so I feel like when I have access to it, either through kind of asking my mom to retell it to me or finding out about it, like I've earned it and it's precious. And so it's not like I have a more emotional connection to the story itself. It's more like I'm conscious that how easily I could have lost it, basically.
So was either folklore more sanitized than the other, and how it was like taught to you? I mean, you know, with stuff like Brothers Grimm and stuff, their stories are often far more sanitized when they're told to children these days.
Yeah, I think Western folklore is, as it's taught to children, is very, very sanitized. And then I remember the first time I read The Little Mermaid, the actual version, I was like, she gets legs and it feels like walking on knives. And her option is to die or, you know, lose her soul and just cease to exist. Okay, fantastic. It was really depressing. But I think because I only have vague memories of Thai folklore as a kid. And again, it was, you know, the stuff I remember was Crocodile King killing everyone in the village, kidnapping brides. So I feel like it's maybe less sanitized in Thailand. But I don't know if that's just, you know, the TV shows that I was kind of watching as a kid weren't meant for children either.
Okay. In one of the videos you did for us, you talked about the fact that despite the original tale being told from the perspective of men, there are often side characters who are women who move the story along. Out of all those characters, why did you choose this one for your story?
So actually, I first became aware of this minor character like maybe I want to say 10 or more, like 12 years ago, because I do a lot of drawing and painting, and someone from my school actually who was a bit older, who's also a fiction writer, was doing a short story based on this character. And she said, I'd love you to commission you to like draw a picture of this character. And I was like, oh, okay, I have no idea who this character is. So that was the first time I was introduced to this character. She's in the original myth, she's a mermaid, she's the daughter of the Demon King. Hanuman, who's like the monkey warrior who's Rama's right-hand man, he tries to build a bridge to Longka, and every night the mermaid and the fishes take the stones away. You know, and he's like, who keeps destroying my bridge every night? So he goes to investigate, discovers the mermaid. You know, obviously he with the intention to kill her, but then he falls in love with her and she falls in love with him. And so she lets him build his bridge in peace, and he crosses over into Longka to kill the demon, basically. And like, so I found that story interesting, and obviously had to research a little bit to do the original kind of illustration for this person. But that story kind of sat with me because she just appears in the story like, oh, there's a mermaid. she stops him from building a bridge, then she helps him build the bridge. And by the way, she also has his child, and then you never hear from her again. Like, what happens to her? You know, do they see each other again? Like, it's just, she's just there as a kind of plot device. And I felt like she deserved to be more than that.
First of all, I just wanted to say all of you guys wrote stories that I really was left me wanting more. So I was so happy when you said in your video that you were writing a full-length novel about this story. I was so excited. Like, even if you don't publish it with Kevin, I'm definitely going to read it. Right, I'll go back to the question that was supposed to lead into. So what aspects are you expanding upon for your novel?
I you know, when you realize that you've decided to adapt an epic and you're like, oh, that means there are a lot of people involved and there's a lot of so that's it. There's a much bigger cast of characters in the novel. I really wanted to explore more, I guess, what we were talking about at the beginning of the live stream, found family, because she has this family and you know, she really wants a relationship with her father, but I guess expanding a bit more that relationship as well, like because I do feel in the short story it's a bit kind of abrupt. It's like, oh, he asks her to do this horrible thing and she's like, no, I'm going to betray you now. And I guess expanding it more to make it, you know, I want the reader when they read it to feel like really torn, you know, like she really shouldn't, you know, betray her father, but she really should because he's not a good person. And I do think that takes more time to develop, because I want the reader to not necessarily like the Demon King, but to be like, okay, I understand why he is the way he is. I understand why she loves him as her father, and also why she has to ultimately betray him. And that, I think, that's still for me the biggest challenge. I'm like, how do I write this in such a way that people feel really torn? Anushka?
Down in the short story, there's sort of because with the character sort of changing allegiance, it could you know easily seem just like a plot twist, but you really set it up really well. Like why she loves her father and why she decides to turn against him, it's very well established. I always actually that I've got an extra question that I might have time to ask you later.
Okay.
But I should probably skip it anyway, because for those of you who are either not watching this live or didn't know, this is supposed to start an hour earlier, so I don't want to keep anyone any longer than they need to be or anything. Thank you so much, you guys, for staying on. I'll move on to Alice and her story Sealskin. So what is it about shapeshifters that captures your imagination?
I'm not actually 100% sure. I think it's just that there's a lot you can do with them. So, you know, you've got shapeshifters that can only go into one form, shapeshifters that act completely different when they're in that one form as opposed to their human form, and just, you know, the new abilities or traits they get. So they're just really fun to play around with, I think.
Okay. The next question is one I asked you guys earlier about like recurring themes in sort of sea myths, so I'll skip past that one. Unless you want to talk about it any further or anything.
No, I really struggled to come up with an answer for that, so I'm fine with you skipping it.
Okay. Well, I think the lead up to this question is quite long, but I just wanted to get this across. What I think is so refreshing about your take on this mythology is that these stories are often about these women being kidnapped by men. You know, these Selkie stories and similar stories. They're about these women being kidnapped by men to marry them, and although this often ends with these women returning to the sea, you know, it's still a cautionary tale. It doesn't reflect the trauma and abuse that would entail, and I think you really effectively, without sort of going into too much depth, get across that feeling of trauma. So I was just wondering what the process behind that was. Like, how did you get across that feeling of trauma in your writing with how you wrote the characters?
So I think I wanted to write something a bit different from, like you said, just the normal Selkie married goes back to the sea type thing. So I wanted to include that, but not have it be the main point. So I had to, of course, mention all of that, but I just didn't go into too much depth. So I guess there's just a lot of space for you to fill in the gaps without necessarily being told exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember how you discovered this mythology?
I don't actually, but I know when I was a kid, I really was into all sorts of mythologies and folklores, and I used to read a lot of, honestly, anthologies a bit like this one, just collections of random folklores from everywhere, really. So it was probably in one of those books.
Okay. Do you know of any other sort of good literature or media that includes Selkies or similar stories that you can recommend?
I actually don't, because most of the time when you see Selkies in stories, they're kind of just mentioned as a passing thing.
Yeah.
And that's sort of why I decided to write about them, because it's,
Yeah.
you know, they're a thing, but they're just not really explored that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought it would be something different.
I think they're definitely one of those things that is sort of mentioned in like world building stories, like using European mythology. It's like also the Selkies somewhere in the background.
Yeah. Yeah, they're always just kind of touched on, but not properly looked at.
Okay. So that's the end of Alice's questions. So NJ, your story is Crimson Sails, which is based on The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen.
Yep.
Do you think the original story was affected by the historical context in which it was written, especially in regard to the story's Christian themes?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely again, you go back and I reread the myth before I started my story, and it's like it's definitely one of those, like, I think it was definitely influenced. Like, I think a lot of writing was influenced by Christian themes at that time too, so it's not surprising. It was still, yeah, like I think it was for sure. And the whole like trying to find a man or try to marry somebody, it's always been I find that theme very common in a lot of the old myths or in those styles sort of thing.
Yeah, I also think that like how like happy the ending of some of these old stories are depends on whether or not like afterlife is an accepted belief. Like
Yeah.
dying, going up to heaven at the end, and
Yes. Yeah.
the other day I looked up Oscar Wilde's old
I love Oscar Wilde.
yeah, his old like fairy tales that he wrote, and the ending, I was reading like the synopses of them, and pretty much all of them ended with, and then they went to heaven. Also,
Yeah.
The Little Prince is another one where it's like, yeah, that's also the ending of where, you know, whether or not there's an afterlife makes the story like happy or sad.
Yeah.
And even like not that happy, just like melancholy sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll stop rambling.
It's okay.
The Thai folklore is a bit different because it's karma, and in Buddhist belief, actually the end goal is to escape the wheel of karma. But like if you look at Thai stories, it's like, no, the end goal is to be reincarnated with your true love in the next life. And that's how you know it's true love, because you've been reincarnated several times together.
Oh.
Why did you include how do you pronounce your character's name? Is it
Lorena, or I haven't seen it. Lorinia, I think is what I pronounce it as.
Why did you include Larinia's exile rather than her going to land in pursuit of a man?
Well, it again comes down to, like, I wanted to make the mermaid more independent and not chasing after a man, because again, I find that theme in a lot of like fairy tales, and it's like, it ends with like, falling in love with somebody. And I wanted to make this story more like, I want to make her more independent, more strong on her own will, and to be like a survivor and kind of focus on surviving whatever comes her way, and not having to rely on a man to save her or rely on a man to be her happiness in the end either.
Yeah, that's it's really, really interesting how you sort of you subverted the original themes.
Yes. Yeah.
Where were we? Why did you decide to divide it into chapters? Was there any particular reason, or?
Not real reason. I don't write a lot of short stories, so I'm always used to writing novels with chapters, and I find that chapters helps me focus on like, okay, this is what this like what I need to focus on here and what I need to achieve in this chunk sort of thing. So I find that my brain just works better in chapters. So it just helps me focus, like, okay, this is what this chapter is about and what I need to, my goal is for the chapter, and I can, and then the next chapter is the next goal sort of thing. And I just somehow it just helps me compartmentalize the story and make it, helps me make it flow a bit better.
Okay. Did you edit them separately as well? Did that help you with editing the story?
Yes, it does.
Did you? There's some nice subtle world building in your story. Did you create any more world building that didn't make it into the story?
Yes, there is a bit more, but this was actually a spin-off from another novel that I was writing that was more like a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. But as I was writing that one, this is when that idea of like, oh, what other fairy tales could I edit, or could I retell in this world? And then The Little Mermaid came to mind as a pirate, or like a speechless pirate sort of thing. So then I thought, well, for this short story, I'm like, well, I'll make the beginnings of that tale for her and like make her the focus of that story, so that maybe if I ever go back and work more on these other stories, she can be a side character that comes in and sails out sort of thing.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
This is brilliant. I want to read that as well now. Oh, great. Now I have stuff on my reading list that hasn't even been published yet.
Yes.
Okay. Last question for you is, how did you choose the names for the mer people?
To be honest, I found there's like a fantasy name generator online, and I use that quite a lot when I'm especially looking for names that are a bit more unique and not like set for in a particular culture. Like I'm trying to find I'm trying to find mermaids names, but of course they wouldn't have the same cultural names as people on land would. So I'm trying to I use a lot of generators to try to come up with a different sound of name or a different looking of a name, just to make it a bit more, oh, this is from a different type of culture sort of thing.
That's the last of the questions that I've already got. Do you guys have any questions for each other?
I want to read the mermaid's adventure once she goes off with the pirates. Like, is that
me too.
Yeah. I'm sure I'll eventually get to that. It's definitely on my mind. I do have an idea, but haven't quite had time yet to explore that one yet.
I was wondering, like, was Captain Ray and her crew like based on anything, or was it completely original? Because I feel like it reminds me of something, but I can't think.
I don't know myself. Originally it was just like, it might be a little bit based off of like the Pirates of the Caribbean and like Long John Silver, or
maybe,
the Dutchman or something, like with those like a crew that's not what you think they are. So like, that's probably where it came from, but I kind of decided like, instead of them being cursed, that they're just, other creatures that have been exiled from whatever reason, and just, made their own like ship to take their own revenge whenever they can.
I actually have a question for Alice, because I really love your story as well. And it's so like wonderfully short and succinct. Are you more of a short story writer or like a long story writer?
I used to write loads and loads of short stories. More recently, I've just completely dropped them to try and focus on novels. But I do really like writing short and snappy stuff, basically.
Because it's so, I really, really love it, because it's like you have like a real emotional gut punch right at the end. And I feel like that's like a good short story, is like, okay, you have like a kind of really specific world building, a really specific atmosphere, and then like short emotional gut punch.
just sort of another question for NJ. So can you give us a hint at like what other in your Beauty and the Beast book, what other characters from other stories there are?
So in that story, I had played with Jack Frost, was a squire to the Beast, which was a more of a mercenary with a gruesome reputation behind him, sort of thing. I did play around with werewolf a little bit, and I think it was not really like a red queen, but like a like the evil queen was another big trope that I used in that story as well.
Well, yeah, there are lots of evil queens to draw from in
Oh
fairy
yeah,
tales. So
exactly.
you have so much material.
Yes.
Alice, do you have like anything that you're working on at the moment that you want to talk about, or?
I'm working on a couple of novels. One of them's horror, and the other one's kind of a slightly more light-hearted, funny-ish fantasy about just the stereotypical prophecy, like chosen one, Dark Lord, but it all goes wrong, and there's 7 Dark Lords, and the chosen one dies. Her bratty teenage son tries to save the world, so that's mainly what I'm working on at the moment.
Oh, that sounds interesting. It's great to have something that sort of inverts those tropes. I mean, the chosen one trope is like, it's almost a joke at this point, like how played out it is. I mean, not to say that everything that uses it is bad. It's just it's it's the only reason the character has to be a part of the story is that the story says they should.
Yeah.
Instead of them needing a personal motivation to be involved in the story.
Yeah, it's quite fun to play around with.
Yeah, I think as a writer on YouTube, I think he wrote something along those lines about like a goblin or something. It's like a sort of a similar sort of comedy that inverts those tropes. His name is Chris Fox. Okay. He has a really interesting writing channel on YouTube where he's a self-published author and he writes really quickly. So he wrote books on how to write really quickly. So a lot of his videos are like, so yeah, I'm gonna write and publish a trilogy in 3 days, and just to show you that you asked if I can do it.
It can be done.
Exaggeration.
Okay.
It is like how is he writing this much? So yeah, that's definitely a good channel to check out.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any other questions for each other?
Good.
I guess both of you, what would you say your favorite myth or legend tale is?
I think
Again, with the picky and favorite.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
I remember again, I was given when I was a kid like a collection of fairy tales, like a book that has like the original Grimm's fairy tales in it and a bunch of other people's tales in it. And there was the Goose Girl was at the end of the book, and it was one of those ones that I think I skipped in childhood until I came back and I reread this. I'm like, wow, this was actually much better than I thought it would be, and not at all what I thought the story would be. So that's still pretty high. If I could have done that one, but I was thinking about doing that one for the contest, but I couldn't find a way to twist it to a bit more original or different. So I'll have to come back to that one some other time.
I think I have a fondness for anything that kind of straddles like the real world and not. So like fairies or like selkies, because it's like you could just be minding your business and then weird crap happens, right? Or like and ghosts. So that Thai ghosts, or in European folklore, you get a lot of kind of ghost stories as well, because they kind of, it's not like an entirely new fantastical realm. It's like, no, they could exist among us, and I like those stories, especially if they've got like a creepy vibe.
Like the most gruesome fairy tale in its original form.
I think we missed the beginning of that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. What's like the most gruesome fairy tale? your opinions?
I remember one I read as a kid. I can't remember. It was an Asian one about someone who was trying to make a bell for the emperor, but it kept going wrong. And then it was something about, oh, only the blood of a young woman can fix it or something. And what I remember, the bell maker's daughter jumped into the molten metal, and the bell came out perfectly. But every time it rang, you could hear her scream. So that was pretty nasty. That stuck with me.
And yeah, I can, you know, when it's like, guess that sounds just like, that sounds like a real folktale. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just got enough disturbing stuff in it that it's like, yep, that sounds like.
For me, I think like Bluebeard was always one that really kind of shook me when I was reading it as a kid, like even like growing up. Like I think it's because it's more of a serial killer at that point, in behind everything else. But yeah, Bluebeard was always kind of creeped me out.
I've recently been reading Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales, and two really gruesome ones that I've read, which they have really innocent sounding names. They're the Rose Elf and the Storks. Don't those sound like jolly fluffy?
They sound lovely.
It's funny because I was about to mention Hans Christian Andersen, because I do think that the original Little Mermaid disturbed me, because obviously I was familiar with Disney, and then I came across it, and it's just like this, you know, mermaid's life is just never-ending pain, and you're like, oh, okay. But in that same book of short stories, speaking of storks, and I don't know if it's the same idea, there's one at the end that's just a story about snails, which sounds, you know, kind of gross, but okay. And it's told from this perspective of snails who live in the garden, and their dream is to be served on a silver platter up in the big house. So like that's their version of heaven, because they haven't understood that being served on a silver platter in the big house means getting eaten, basically. Like, this is horrible. Yeah, I think Hans, old Hans wins a lot of gruesome awards.
Did you know that he once stayed at Charles Dickens' house?
I didn't.
Yeah, he was a really big fan of Charles Dickens, and they met at some point at a party, and he's invited to stay. And apparently, it was the Charles Dickens family in the end had to like ask him to leave. Like apparently, once he read a review of one of his stories, and then he went into the garden, curled up into a ball, and cried.
Well, I was gonna say, like, everything I've read about Hans Christian Andersen, he was kind of like quite a depressed, slightly, you know, like very melancholic guy. So I was like, he was at a party. He met someone at a party. This tracks. This sounds like what I'd expect.
Yeah, apparently, like after he left, Charles Dickens put pinned a piece of paper to the door that said Hans Christian Andersen stayed here for 2 weeks, and it was. And hopefully he'll never stay here again, or something like that. It's like, oh my, they from the sound of it, they just had a terrible time. So do you guys have any other questions for each other, or?
No, I think so.
Okay. Well, I think the important lesson for everyone watching this to learn is that these three writers have written 3 fantastic fairy tales, retold 3 fantastic fairy tales in I nearly said the wrong one, in Folklore, a Dark Anthology, which is coming out this Friday. We're going to be doing live streams every day until Friday to celebrate the launch of this book and Murder the March Hare. And I think another thing that the people watching this have learned is that you're 3 writers who people definitely need to watch. People definitely need to find out when you publish your first novel, because I mean already I'm just like how do I keep track of you guys? I need to follow in all social media so I make sure that I read your books when they come out.
I think Twitter is definitely the best way. I'm not the best at Twitter at all. I don't understand people who are very, very active on Twitter, but I definitely post any writing stuff there, and I'm locacious_VIV.
Yeah, I was wondering how to pronounce that word.
It just means very talkative, which, as you can see, I am.
Yeah, Twitter is still one of probably the best way to contact me and follow me right now. I post a lot of my updates and whatever writing stuff I'm going on or questions about my writing. Yeah, so my Twitter handle again is at NatJeanM, so NatJeanM.
I don't have a Twitter or anything just yet, but I will. I'm definitely going to look into setting one up at some point.
Well, whenever you do, we'll
yeah.
definitely put this in the description of the video. I will.
Yeah, I'll send it.
Put that stuff in the description of the video. If I managed to get back on YouTube after today. The reason, if you're wondering why my camera isn't on, is because I tore all my hair out on the run up to this interview. Everything went wrong.
Oh,
Except
no.
for the interview itself. The interview itself has gone wonderfully. For those of you who didn't hear me say earlier, it took an hour to set this up. This is an hour late, but so yeah. Once again, thank you guys for staying on here.
Well, thank you. This is actually
Yeah, thanks.
worried. We're like, are they okay?
So yeah, I think I'll just. Do you guys have anything else to say or announce or anything, or should I just say my little outro?
Buy the book.
Yes, buy the book.
Not just because
Don't regret it.
but genuinely, these ladies, their stories are fantastic as well. I really
Absolutely.
enjoyed all the stories in the anthology.
Yeah, it is fantastic, and I'm a volunteer, so I'm not being paid to say this. They are fantastic. So so thank you guys very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for being so
Thank
interesting
you.
and writing such great stories. And yeah, I'll just read my little outro. If you're still with us at the end of this live stream, thank you very much. I'll announce this week's announcements. This is to be announced during the other streams this week. Tomorrow, which is Wednesday, I'll be announcing an audiobook giveaway. On Thursday, I'll be announcing another audiobook giveaway. And on Friday, on the day of the launch of both Murder the March Hare and Folklore, a Dark Anthology, I will be announcing the next Crystal Peak short story competition. So if you've listened to these lady stories and thought, wow, this sounds great, I should apply for a competition with them, well, stay tuned on Friday and we'll tell you what the competition is. Where was I? I feel half of this live stream is me saying, where was I? If you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more about being a writer and you want to hear about our new releases, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to be notified whenever we post a video. So thank you very much, you guys, for being here. And
Organizing.
hopefully the audience will join us for the other live streams this week. I think we've had a handful of people watching, but it's good. At least the people can always rewatch this. So
Yes.
The important thing is this fantastic interview is out there. That's the important thing. You've got your stories out there, and all the information anyone needs to know about your stories is now on the internet. So yay!
Thank you so much, Anushka. I always look forward to receiving your new emails. I'm like, ooh, a new email from Crystal.
Oh, thank you. I was worried because I kept emailing you guys whenever we posted a video. I was worried that you guys wouldn't read the whole email. So that's why there's been less. So yeah, that's another good reason. Everyone who's listening to this won't be able to get a lovely email from me telling them when the video is. So that means you should subscribe to the channel. I feel like I'm delaying the ending. I don't want to get off this call. It's been so nice. Well, I can't remember. Which of you guys are going to be on the Friday live stream?
I'm gonna be on Friday.
I can be on. I wasn't on the list, but.
Oh, weren't you? So sorry, I'll add you. Okay, well, it sounds like if you really enjoyed this live stream and you want to see them all again, you can see them all again on Friday when we celebrate the launch.
Yes.
Okay, so I shall finally end the call now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
No problem. Bye.